Good evening, and welcome to Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's installment provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep for once. So lie back, adjust your volume, take a nice deep breath, and off we go. Before we begin, I'd like to mention 2 new subscribers to our Patreon account, Viator Rex and Stephen Gruskowski. Thank you so much for your support. It's really appreciated. If you're interested in the perks available to subscribers, just go to patreon.com/boringbookspod. And now let's get to the reading. This evening we're reading The Woman and the Car, a chatty little handbook for all women who motor or who want to motor, by Dorothy Levitt, edited with introductory articles by C. Bing Hall, illustrated by photographs specially taken, published by John Lane Company, London and New York, 1909. Let's begin. Introductory. In presenting this book to the public, the publisher is acting largely on the request of some hundreds of ladies, some already motorists, others would-be motorists. Miss Dorothy Levitt last year wrote a short series of articles for the Daily Graphic on the subject of motoring for women. These articles attracted a great deal of attention, and Miss Levitt was inundated with letters from all parts of the United Kingdom and also from abroad, asking her for further information on various points, and also begging her to publish the articles and additional information in volume form. Miss Levitt was also asked to contribute articles on the same lines to many magazines and weekly publications, and further received requests from a number of distinguished women to give them personal instruction in the art of driving and managing the mechanism of their cars. As the simplest way out of answering all these requests, Miss Levitt has revised and enlarged her former articles and has added new chapters and a great deal of matter which she believes every woman motorist or beginner will find of use. There has been no attempt to make this volume a formal textbook on motoring for women, but rather a chatty little handbook containing simple and understandable instructions and hints for all women motorists, whether beginners or experts. The facts contained in the various chapters are not those gathered from any standard manual of motoring, but are from Miss Levitt's own practical experience of 6 years daily driving, in all sorts of cars, in all sorts of weather, and under all sorts of conditions. Pleasure trips, long-distance tours at home and abroad, and in competitions. There may be points here and there which she has overlooked. Miss Levitt, however, will answer such questions or furnish such further information as readers may properly desire, either through the medium of His Majesty's mails, or perhaps in a later edition of this volume. The photographs with which the several chapters are illustrated were specially taken for the work by Mr. Horace W. Nichols. London, February 1909. Dorothy Levitt, a personal sketch. It is not considered difficult for a mere man to write about a pretty young woman. Yet in the case of Dorothy Levitt, it is difficult. There are so many things in her delightful private life which would have a vivid interest for the public, but I am forbidden to tread too deeply in that direction. Dorothy Levitt is the premier woman motorist and boaterist of the world, and she is ready to prove and uphold her title at any time. In the United Kingdom, in France, and in Germany she has achieved distinctions, won success, and carried off trophies such as no woman and few men can claim. 5 years ago, Miss Levitt won the championship of the seas in the great motorboat race at Trouville, France, defeating all comers. 3 years ago at Brighton, she won a race and created a world record for women of 79.75 miles per hour. The following year, she broke her own record and created a new world record for women of 91 miles an hour. Looking at Miss Levitt, one can hardly imagine that she could drive a car at such terrific speed. The public, in its mind's eye, no doubt figures this motor champion as a big, strapping Amazon. Dorothy Levitt is exactly, or almost so, the direct opposite of such a picture. She is the most girlish of womanly women, slight in stature, shy and shrinking, almost timid in her everyday life. It is seeming a marvel that she can really be the woman who has done all that the records show. And the way in which she came to be a motorist, it is a story in itself. She was from childhood a good cyclist, a good driver of horses, a rider to hounds, and an excellent shot with rifle or gun. Fishing was her favorite pastime. She was quick of eye and sure of hand, and nerves troubled her not at all. A friend owning a motor car paid a visit to the family in the West Country. In a very few days, Dorothy Levitt had become well acquainted with the intricacies of that motor. She handled the wheel as well as the owner or his chauffeur. She attended as a spectator a county competition, driving the car with such skill that the attention was attracted of the manager of a big motor firm. He secured an introduction and asked her to drive one of his cars in a competition. She agreed, and thus became the first Englishwoman to drive a motor car in a public competition. Her first prize was won a month later, and since then she has steadily mounted the tree of her chosen profession. Yet she has remained an amateur, accepting no money prizes, only medals and cups and such-like trophies. In hill climbs, endurance, and speed trials, she is alike invincible. At the first aerial hare and hounds race of balloons this year, she was selected as the umpire. The most careful as well as intrepid and fast-driving motorist was wanted. Miss Levitt unerringly followed the hare from London to near Arundel, Sussex, and was on the spot when the first balloon among the hounds descended near the hare. Miss Levitt has been offered many enticing professional engagements on the continent and in the United States, but prefers to remain at home and an amateur. In appearance, Dorothy Levitt looks partly French, partly Irish, with a soupçon of American, yet she is wholly English. Of medium height, her figure is slim and very graceful. She has a very girlish but expressive face, large eyes that are brown and gray and green in varying lights, brown hair that curls, a straight nose that has the bare inclination of a saucy upward tip, and a mouth which is too large. It is a charming, winning face. The one fault of Dorothy Levitt is her modesty, almost amounting to bashfulness. One cannot get her to tell much of her many exciting adventures, particularly those of which she is the heroine. She is immensely popular, has been toasted by royalty at German motor banquets, elected honorary member of many of the first automobile clubs in this country and on the continent, and has a host of friends, some in the sacred circles of society, others distinguished men and women of the more bohemian circles of art and literature, music, and the drama. She is an inveterate first-nighter, wears simple but ravishing clothes, and to those who do not know her, passes as a bright butterfly of fashion. In a flat in a quiet but fashionable neighborhood in the West End of London, Miss Levitt lives the life of a bachelor girl. There she has a housekeeper and maid, and a tiny Pomeranian, one Dodo, to keep her company. The flat contains as its feature rooms a Louis XIV drawing room and a Flemish dining room, the latter the scene of many little luncheon parties, for which Miss Levitt is also famous. Hers is a busy life, involving many thousands of miles of travel in the year. She is to be seen at Ascot, Goodwood, Cowes, at Henley, at Ranelagh. Today she may be in London. Next week you may hear of her as in France or Germany, taking part in a motor competition. The week following she may be in Scotland, or of a house party in the Shires, or boatering in the blue waters off the Riviera coast. It is little wonder that her ambition is to leave the gay whirl and to settle down quietly in the country with her motor, her dogs, and a fishing rod and a gun. Of her public records, I can do no better than quote extracts from her diary, for Miss Levitt, unlike the generality of women, is most careful in keeping a very businesslike diary. Here are the extracts. April 1903. First Englishwoman to take part in public motor car competition. Did not win. Will do better next time. May 13th, 1903. Glasgow to London non-stop run. Drove 16 horsepower Gladiator. Gained 994 marks out of a possible 1,000. Marks deducted for tire troubles. August 1903. Won Gaston Meunier Cup at Trouville, France. Value of cup, 350 guineas. August 8, 1903. Drove motorboat Napier at Cowes. Won the race. Afterwards commanded to go over to Royal Yacht by the King as His Majesty wanted to see me put boat through its paces. King thinks such boats may be useful for dispatch work. September 1903. 1,000 miles reliability trials. 16 horsepower Gladiator. 1. Did fastest time in class. October 2nd, 1903. Southport speed trials. Drove 16 horsepower Gladiator. Won silver cup for speed. Won championship of the seas, Trouville. Napier motorboat. Boat afterwards bought by French government for £1,000. September 1904. Light car trials. Successful. Drove small de Dion 8 horsepower. Entirely alone. No mechanic attended to car. Did everything myself. Had non-stop for 5 days, but small difficulties on 6th and last day. October 1904. Southport speed trials. Drove 50 horsepower Napier. Won 2 medals. February 1905. Did Liverpool and back to London in 2 days, averaging a level 20 miles per hour throughout for the entire 411 miles, unaccompanied by mechanic. 8 horsepower de Dion. May 1905. Won non-stop certificate at Scottish trials. Ran over very rough and hilly roads in the Highlands. 8 horsepower de Dion. July 1905. Won Brighton sweepstakes on 80 horsepower Napier at rate of 79 3/4 miles per hour, constituting the woman's world record. Beat a great many professional drivers. Drove at rate of 77 3/4 miles in Daily Mail Cup. June 1906. Shelsley Walsh Hill Climb was only 6th at finish. 50 horsepower Napier. Mine was only car competing which was not fitted with non-skids. Car nearly went over embankment owing to this and greasy state of roads. June 1906. South Harding Hill Climb. 1 medal on 50 horsepower Napier. Also presented with silver casket for winning private match on same hill. July 1906. Aston Hill Climb Tring. 3rd on 50 horsepower Napier. October 1906. Broke my own record and created new world's record for women at Blackpool. 90 horsepower 6-cylinder Napier, racing car. Drove at rate of 91 miles per hour. Had near escape as front part of bonnet worked loose, and had I not pulled up in time, might have blown back and beheaded me. was presented with a cup by the Blackpool Automobile Club and also a cup by SF Edge Limited. May 1907, Bexel, second prize, appearance competition, 8 horsepower de Dion. June 1907, Germany, won gold medal Herkimer Trophy race, 1,818 kilometers, 4th out of 172 competitors. In hill climb, 5th, and 10th in Forstenrider Park speed trial out of 172 competitors. Was first of all women in all competitions. 60 horsepower 6-cylinder Napier. There were 42 cars with much larger engines than I had. October 1907, France, Gaillon Hill Climb, 40 horsepower 6-cylinder Napier, won in my class by 20 seconds, gradient of hill 1 in 10 average. June 1908, Prince Heinrich Trophy, Germany, made absolute non-stop run on 45 horsepower Napier, 1 large silver black. Chapter 1. The car, its cost, upkeep, and accessories. Patience, the capacity for taking pains, is of more value than the most ponderous nerve. You may be afraid, as I am, of driving in a hansom through the crowded streets of town. You may be afraid of a mouse, or so nervous that you are startled at the slightest of sudden sounds. Yet you can be a skillful motorist, and enjoy to the full the delights of this greatest of outdoor pastimes, if you possess patience, the capacity for taking pains. Motoring is a pastime for women, young, middle-aged, and, if there are any, old. There may be pleasure in being whirled around the country by your friends and relatives, or in a car driven by your chauffeur, but the real, the intense pleasure, the actual realization of the pastime, comes only when you drive your own car. I have hunted, and was one with those who declare that the most glorious of all outdoor life is in the saddle, on a fast, clean-jumping hunter. But when, by accident, I took up motoring, I found the exhilaration, the delights of the gallop doubled. It fascinated me, and it will fascinate any woman who tries it. I am writing this little book, not so much for those women who have already taken up motoring, but for those who would like to, but either dare not because of nervousness, or who imagine it is too difficult to understand the many necessary details. In the following chapters, I will endeavor to explain everything in the simplest possible manner, without lapsing into confusing technicalities. The first thing to discuss is the car. There are scores of makes, good, bad, and indifferent. I have tried many different makes and have come to the conclusion that the de Dion is an ideal single-cylinder car for a woman to drive. It combines simplicity with reliability, 2 very important items to the automobilist. For your own driving, if you are going to attend to the mechanism yourself, you should purchase a single-cylinder car. More cylinders mean more work, and also more expense as regards tires, petrol, oil, etc. The single-cylinder car is the most economical to run. Being constructed in a much lighter manner, the weight on the tires is less. Consequently, the tire bill is smaller, a matter of great importance in the upkeep of a car. The horsepower of a single-cylinder car is usually 8 horsepower or less. As regards carriage work, of course the purchaser can suit herself, but the Victoria type of body has the most graceful lines. Color also is a matter of one's own selection. Dark blue, brown, green, red, or cream, they all look well, and can be picked out with lines to match the upholstery, or further embellished with a top panel of basket work, as is the car in this photograph. Such a car as I have described will cost, new, from £230. This price, however, is for the car itself, upholstered and complete as to seats and side lamps, it is the accessories that bring up the cost. It adds greatly to one's comfort to have a hood made of either black leather or khaki-colored canvas, with nickel or brass mountings to match the finish of your car. Such a hood will cost in leather about £20 and in canvas £18. I am quoting for the best quality in every instance, for with motoring it is quality that counts in the long run. A folding glass screen with nickel or brass fittings framed in stained wood will cost £10. The front lamps will cost about £6 per pair, and the rear lamp £1 to £1.05. A waterproof rug can be bought for £1 to £2. The car will, of course, seat two, but it is often advisable to have a third seat. This should be constructed so as to fold down when not in use, and would cost £15. You can have a stationary seat fitted for £10, but these do not look so nice, though quite as comfortable as those that fold down. In addition to these things, it is necessary to carry a tire repair outfit, which will cost about £1. Also, the following tools and spares: ammeter, jack, pliers, spanners, carburetor jet key, large and small screwdrivers, hammer, oil can, grease injector, tire pump, sparking plug, inlet and exhaust valves, trembler blade and screw, some washers, split pins, file, very fine file for platinum points, emery powder, insulated tape, and some waste or swabs. In buying your car, you will probably find that the last car you were on is the best. It is liable to become somewhat confusing if you go for many trial runs. But one thing to bear in mind is that the car that will do 5 miles an hour faster than the one you previously tried is not necessarily the best car. It may be faster while it is running, but it may not run for long. Therefore, take my advice and pin your faith on the car with the reputation for reliability, the one that will not entail a big expenditure every few months for repair. Nearly all of us nowadays have some motoring friends who have probably had experience with different makes of cars. Their experience should benefit you in your choice. There are some very inexpensive cars on the market, but inexpensive only as to initial outlay. They are likely to prove themselves sorry bargains before many months have passed. One of the chief joys of motoring is to feel that you can rely upon your car. In regard to housing the car, if you are not fortunate enough to possess a stable or garage of your own, one of the following courses is open to you. Hire a stable or garage, and a man to attend to the cleaning of the car. Place it at one of the many garages, public and semi-private, now in existence. Or you can stable it at the nearest mews and arrange with the ostler to do the washing. I cannot give the exact cost of the first and last of these, as they would naturally vary, but if placed at a regular garage, the cost would be from 8 shillings 6 to 12 shillings 6 per week. Another outlay is to be found in tips. The men at a garage are always hungry for tips, and your car will be polished with greater zest if the tips are frequent or generous. The advertisement of the no-tip garage is a fallacy. The proprietor may consider this principle the right one, but if you act according to his ideas, your car will probably suffer. Petrol varies slightly in price, but is usually from 1 shilling to 1 shilling 4 pence per gallon. As with the car illustrated, you are able to run 28 to 32 miles on 1 gallon. You will see that petrol is not a great item. The next duty that devolves on you after becoming the owner of a car is to procure your licenses. There are 2. One, a license for the car, the same as a carriage license, the cost of which is governed according to the weight of the car. probably near 2 guineas. The other a driving license, costing 5 shillings. Both of these are to be obtained from the London County Council offices in Spring Gardens, London Southwest, or in the country at the various county council headquarters, though the carriage license can be obtained after due application at almost any post office. Your driving license is an official printed paper with your name and address written in. To obtain a number for the car, it is necessary to apply to Spring Gardens or any of the registration and licensing authorities in the United Kingdom. If one writes to a county council, the letter should be addressed Clerk to the County Council of blank, County Council Offices blank, and if to a county borough, to the Town Clerk, Town Hall blank. The registration fee is 20 shillings. You will have to fill up a form and will then have a number registered. This number you must have painted on 2 tin plates, white on a black background. The figures must be 3 1/2 inches deep. These number plates must be affixed to the back and front of your car. The back one must be so placed that the light from the back lamp is thrown on it, and thus the number distinctly seen at night. It is also necessary for part of the rear lamp to show a red light. You should never go in your car without this license, your driving license, for you must produce it when asked by the proper authorities or pay the penalty of £5. But more of this later. Chapter 2. The all-important question of dress. An all-important question is dress. Automobilists are nowadays more careful in the choice of their attire, but there are still a goodly number who seem to imagine it is impossible to look anything but hideous when in an automobile. On a closed-in car, limousine, or landaulet, any kind of attire is permissible as the conditions are precisely the same as being driven in a carriage. But with an open car, neatness and comfort are essential. When racing, or when in countries where speed is not looked upon with such horror as in England, on the long, straight, seemingly never-ending military roads of France, one can travel at a speed that makes goggles or masks a necessity. But for motoring under ordinary conditions, there is no reason why one should wear them. It might be borne in mind that I am writing this book for the woman who is desirous of being her own driver and owning her own car. Yet perhaps my advice will be applicable to the whole sex. I average about 400 miles per week in all conditions of weather, all sorts of cars and all sorts of places, and therefore speak from experience, in many instances dearly bought. Now, as to ordinary garments, dress for the season of the year exactly as you would if you were not going motoring. I would advise shoes rather than boots, as they give greater freedom to the ankles and do not tend to impede the circulation, as a fairly tightly laced or buttoned boot would do. But this is a matter of individual taste. In wintertime, it is advisable to wear high gaiters, have them specially made, almost up to the knee. As regards a frock, the plain tailor-made, with a shirt blouse of linen, silk, or viola, is without doubt the most comfortable, and the wearer has the advantage at the end of a day's run of appearing trim and neat. Under no circumstances wear lace or fluffy adjuncts to your toilette. If you do, you will regret them before you have driven half a dozen miles. Regarding coats, there is nothing like a thick frieze, homespun or tweed, lined with Jaeger or fur. The former has the advantage of being lighter in weight than the latter, and is just as warm and much less expensive. In England, in winter, one can wear a coat of this description right up to the beginning of summer. For summer itself, the ideal coat is of thin cream serge. It retains its freshness and does not crease like alpaca, linen, or silk. The serge looks and feels smart all the summer. the silk or alpaca after its first hard day begins to look creased and shabby. Do not heed the cry, "Nothing like leather." Leather coats do not wear out gracefully. At first they may be delightful, but when they have been caught in 2 or 3 showers, they begin to have a hard, stiff feeling which is far from comfortable. I have, however, seen very pretty costumes, coats and skirts, made of thin glove kid or suede, but these are luxuries, as they cost from 25 to 30 guineas each. As to headgear, there is no question. The round cap or close-fitting turban of fur are the most comfortable and suitable, though with the glass screen up, it is possible to wear an ordinary hat with a veil round it. However, if you go in for caps, see that they fit well. There is nothing more uncomfortable than the cap that does not fit. It is a good plan to have caps made to match your costumes. When fixing the cap, pin it securely, and over it put a crepe de chine veil of length aplenty. These can be obtained from most of the leading drapers, and it is quite a simple matter to make them yourself with the length of crepe or washing silk. Before tying the veil, twist the ends. This prevents the knot working loose and is very necessary, as the veil, in addition to protecting the hair, helps to keep the hat securely in place. One of the most important articles of wear is a scarf or muffler for the neck, and the manner of wearing it is also important. Fold it, then wind round the throat, beginning at the front, bringing the ends round from the back and fold over in front. See that the throat is covered closely and not too loosely. Wearing this properly will save you all manner of colds, sore throats, and kindred sufferings. Regarding gloves, never wear woolen gloves, as wool slips on the smooth surface of the steering wheel and prevents one getting a firm grip. Gloves made of good soft kid, fur-lined, without a fastening, and made with just a thumb are the ideal gloves for winter driving. It is not advisable to wear rings. If you do not want to leave them at home or in a hotel, but want to wear them when you are indoors, during your ride or tour, take them off while on the car and stow them away. Rings when you are driving yourself hurt terribly, and also the stones are loosened. Bracelets and bangles are irritating unless secured by a sleeve or glove from working up and down. Indispensable to the motorist who is going to drive her own car is the overall. This should be made of butcher blue or brown linen to fasten at the back, the same shape as an artist's overall. It should have long sleeves. You can always slip off your coat and put on the overall in a moment, and it is necessary if you have anything to do in the car. Remember, it is better to get grease spots on your washable overall than on your coat or your clothes. While there are several little repairs that it would be impossible to remedy if wearing gloves, the majority of work on a car, filling tanks, etc., can be done just as well if one's hands are protected by a pair of wash leather gloves. You will find room for these gloves in the little drawer under the seat of the car. This little drawer is the secret of the dainty motorist. What you put in it depends upon your tastes, but the following articles are what I advise you to have in its recesses: a pair of clean gloves, an extra handkerchief, clean veil, powder puff unless you despise them, hairpins and ordinary pins, a hand mirror, and some chocolates are very soothing sometimes. It is also advisable to carry a tablet of anti-oil soap. If it has been necessary to use bare hands for a repair, you will nearly always find some grease on your hands, and this it is impossible to remove with ordinary soap. Of course, it is possible to remove it with a little petrol, but I have found that petrol roughens the skin, and that the anti-oil soap is much better. The mirror should be fairly large to be really useful, and it is better to have one with a handle to it. Just before starting, take the glass out of the little drawer and put it in the little flat pocket of the car. You will find it useful to have it handy, not for strictly personal use, but to occasionally hold up to see what is behind you. Sometimes you will wonder if you heard a car behind you, and while the necessity or inclination to look round is rare, you can, with the mirror, see in a flash what is in the rear without losing your forward way, and without releasing your right-hand grip of the steering wheel. If you are going to drive alone in the highways and byways, it might be advisable to carry a small revolver. I have an automatic Colt, and find it very easy to handle as there is practically no recoil, a great consideration to a woman. While I have never had occasion to use it on the road, though I may add I practice continually at a range to keep my eye and hand, it is nevertheless a comfort to know that should the occasion arise, I have the means of defending myself. If you are driving alone, a dog is great company. The majority of dogs like motors, and soon get into the habit of curling up on the seat by your side, under your coat. Chapter 3. The Mechanism of the Car. Be sure you are right, then go ahead. This good old motto is just the thing to remember when one is going in for motoring. Remember, I am discussing the woman who drives her own car and does all those things that ordinarily a chauffeur would have to do. I am constantly asked by some astonished people, do you really understand all the horrid machinery of a motor, and could you mend it if it broke down? But it really is not a very difficult matter. The details of the engine may sound complicated and may look horrid, but an engine is easily mastered. A few hours of proper diligence, provided you are determined to learn and you know all that you have to know. Again, I must remind you that I am discussing the single-cylinder car, which is by far the simplest for a woman to drive and attend to alone. I have made it a rule never to allow anyone to drive my own little car, and this is a rule that everyone will find useful. All cars have their individual idiosyncrasies, and if you alone drive, you get to understand every sound. But if you allow anyone to drive, you are ignorant of what strain the car has been put to. As a matter of fact, a strange hand on the wheel and levers seems to put the car out of tune. Before starting out for a ride, your first duty is to see that the petrol tank is full. It is unpleasant to be stranded on the road, miles from anywhere, minus petrol. The petrol tank is, in many instances, under the seat. Lift the cushions, unscrew the cap, and peep in. If it is dark, it will be necessary to hold a piece of stick in to see how much petrol there is. But when there is occasion to do this, be very careful that there is no dirt on the stick, or a choked petrol pipe or carburetor will result. The slightest atom of dirt in the petrol will cause trouble. If you are going for a very long run, it is a wise plan to take an extra can with you. It is perhaps unnecessary for me to warn you not to take a light near the petrol tank while it is being filled up. Many cars have been wrecked through carelessness in this direction. Remember, it is not actually the petrol that catches a light, but the vapor that arises from it. If your petrol tank runs dry, there is no danger. The car will simply come to a standstill. The chamber in which the petrol and air mix and vaporize is called the carburetor, from which the vapor is carried to the cylinder head by means of a pipe, and is there exploded by the tiny electric spark from the sparking plug, the explosion forcing down the piston and causing the crankshaft to revolve. Having examined your petrol supply, being sure to replace the screw quite tightly, your next duty is to see that the water tank is full. This tank is situated behind the engine, close to the dashboard. Unscrew the top, and if you cannot see without uncomfortably bending over, take a twig or stick and poke it in. The wet portion will tell you how much water there is, though on On some cars there is, affixed to the screw tops of both the petrol and water tanks, a metal rod which shows the amount of petrol or water in the tank. When you are refilling the water tank, you can tell by the overflow when the tank is full. There is a special outlet so as to prevent the surplus from flowing over the top of the engine. Be sure to screw the top of the tank on again. The next for examination is the oil tank. This supplies the oil to lubricate the engine and gears. There are several different types of lubricators, force or drip feed, according to the type of car. It is necessary to lift the bonnet to refill the oil tank. The bonnet is the metal covering to the engine. When the bonnet is lifted, metal supports will be found each side to hold it up. It is important that you have plenty of oil, for it is the lubrication which keeps your machinery in working trim. Without oil, your engine and gears would overheat and probably seize. The lubricating oil is forced by a small hand pump to all the different parts of the engine and gears requiring it. With the car illustrated, it is necessary to pump a charge of oil into the engine about every 20 miles. This is an easy matter, and it is not necessary to stop the car to do it. Before starting out each day, you should allow the used oil to run out of the base chamber. This is done by lifting a small rod you will find on the left-hand side of the commutator. If you pull this up, it releases the oil, which you will see running out. When it is all out, do not forget to press the rod into place again, as failure to do this would mean serious trouble, as the fresh oil, when pumped into the engine, would simply run right through onto the ground. After this stale oil has been released, 2 charges should be pumped into the engine before starting. This is done by turning the pointer on the pump handle to reservoir, then pull up slowly, turn the pointer to motor, and press gently down. To lubricate the gear, fill from reservoir as before, turn the pointer to vitesse, and press down in the same manner. Apart from filling the various grease caps occasionally, on the steering, etc., and greasing the wheel bearings, this is all that is necessary in the way of lubrication. The wheels, however, only require greasing about every 400 miles. Your next duty will be to test the brake. Get into the habit of doing this every time you go out. It is no trouble to run the car a few yards to ascertain whether the brakes grip or not. If all motorists, no matter how expert, were to spend a few moments in taking this precaution, there would undoubtedly be fewer accidents. We often read that the steering gear went wrong, but I am right in saying that in many cases, the accidents are caused by the failure of the brakes when applied suddenly on an emergency. The brakes may be in a satisfactory condition when you lock up the car after a day's run, but when the car is stationary, there is the slight possibility of a little oil dripping on them during the night, rendering them practically useless. If there is oil on the brakes, however, it can easily be burnt off by running the car a little way and applying the brakes several times. The friction will gradually burn it off. The brakes sometimes slacken and need adjustment, an easy operation. Types of brakes may vary slightly with different types of cars. On my single-cylinder car, the brake is very simple. To adjust, you will find a small handle underneath the frame towards the back of the car on the off side. Half a turn one way or the other if the brake is too slack or too fierce usually suffices. It can be adjusted one way or the other in about a second or two. We now come to the various levers and their different functions. There are 6 levers. The change speed or gear lever on the left-hand side of the steering column under the steering wheel. The ignition lever and the air lever, both to be found under the steering wheel on the right-hand side of the steering column. The hand throttle underneath the steering wheel. In center of column on a small ratchet, the handbrake lever and the first speed lever. In this chapter, I shall only deal with the first four. It is the gear lever that sets the gear in motion, practically puts the muscles of your car into play. It is imperative that it be in neutral or central position when starting the engine, or when applying either the hand or foot brake. This gear lever, when in neutral position, disconnects the engine and gear, thereby allowing the road wheels to be brought to a standstill. When first learning to drive, there is a tendency to suddenly apply the brake without bringing the gear lever into neutral position. Consequently, a great strain is put upon the entire mechanism as rival forces are brought into play, viz., while the engine is pulling and through the driving shaft turning the gears and propelling the wheels. The action of the brake is to make the back wheels stationary. As an example, the shock on the mechanism in the event of this happening can be compared to taking a watch and banging it on the ground. With regard to the other levers, always be quite sure that the ignition top lever is retarded and that the air lever is in correct position. It is impossible to exactly give the correct position for these, as it is a matter of adjustment and liable to slightly vary with different cars. However, when once you have found the correct position, it is impossible to get it wrong. The next thing to do is to switch on the electric current. The car carries a battery on the dashboard, where is also the coil. As it is possible to run 2,000 or 3,000 miles on one battery, the replacing is not an expensive item. The cost of a new battery is 15 shillings 9 pence. The switch is on the coil, and the current is set in motion by moving the switch from A to M. Having done all these things, you are ready to start up the engine, and after that, to drive. It has taken a long time to explain the preliminary things that you should do before starting off on a run, and the non-motorist, and even perhaps the intending motorist, will say, "If I have to do all these troublesome things, it will take up all my time, so I think I had better have a chauffeur." But let me assure you that while it has taken some little time to explain these things in the plainest possible language, it will take you but a few minutes to carry them out. And with that, I think we'll stop tonight's reading of The Woman and the Car by Dorothy Levitt, who seems like a person we should all know more about. If you have a book you'd like to hear read, or a comment about the podcast, the best place to catch me is on Twitter at BoringBooksPod. I would really love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Until our next boring book, good night.